So we want to make sure that we can get through our presentation today and leave enough time for questions at the end and, of course, throughout. So we are here today as part of Hearts Connected free webinar series, Prioritizing the Me in Mental Health. We provide this to support child life professionals by offering this space to discuss topics related to mental health. And today we have an awesome international presenter with us speaking about utilizing creativity as self-care. And today Michelle Dixon will be sharing her insight into how creating art as an adult can help build resilience and creating a learning experience of, how to work with that inner critic that we might have to explore our emotions. So before we start quickly, just about Hearts Connected, let me get on the screen here. Just about Hearts Connected, we are a child life company that serves children and families across the United States. And as a CCLS, which I think all of you were today so far, we are a referral source for you. So on the screen here, you see our website. You can reach us at info@heartsconnected.org. So if you have any questions or if you ever want to refer a patient or family to us, super easy process, and we would appreciate any referrals. So if you have any questions, you're unsure, you can always follow us on social media, take a look at our website, and just refer our way. We are a for-profit company, but we do have a scholarship fund that allows patients to use our services at a discounted rate. So since we offer this webinar series for free, we are grateful, of course, for any participation in our donation program, even if it's just $1, to help us support those funds for reaching patients that couldn't typically afford our services. Okay, so let's go back to our screen here. So again, my name is Caitlin, and I am a CCLS of about 8 years working within the United States, in addition to internationally. And I have worked in clinical settings and now in private practice with Hearts Connected. We do have, I know not everyone is with us live, but we did have about 100 registrants for our session today. So it's an awesome turnout and we're super excited. So we want to thank you all for your flexibility. We know we changed the day last minute. So for those of you who could still be with us today, we really appreciate it. And we thank you for that. Like I said earlier, our hope is that this is an interactive, engaging webinar. So feel free to put your video on, ask questions throughout. You don't have to wait till the end. That's part of why we capped this webinar series at 100 registrants, just so that it can be a more personal experience and interactive. As always, this logistics piece of it, after the webinar, you will get an email from someone at Hearts Connected with a survey. If you can please fill out that survey. And once you complete that, you will get access, of course, to the recording of this webinar, as well as your certificate for your PDU. So without further ado, let me properly introduce Michelle Dixon to you. So Michelle Dixon, she's been working as a registered art therapist for over 11 years, I believe. Within the hospital setting. She has worked in family violence and within community art programs. 5 years ago, she also established the very first art therapy program for children overseas in Doha, Qatar, and has since been published. Her written work has been published numerous times about the programming that she has activated and her success overseas. So today, Michelle is here to share her insight and her experience in how creating art as an adult can help build resilience and what it looks like to explore your emotions through art. So that's all of me now, Michelle. The rest is you. Thank you for being here, Michelle.
Thank you. It's a privilege to present to everyone. I've had the opportunity to work with a lot of great American, Canadian, and one Singaporean child life specialist. So there's so much connection between art therapy and child life, and how that I've actually learned a lot in my own practice, because I think child life specialists really bring out the story element and really allow a child to feel connected with their body and their story through that. So yeah, I can see the hard work that everyone does and how burnout, like everyone, is a big thing when you're in these caring professions. Caitlin, can you change the first slide? So it's similar to how Caitlin introduced me. So I've been working in all different areas. Okay. So I'm registered with the Australian, New Zealand and Asian Art Therapy Association and the American Art Therapy Association. So, okay, we can go to the next one. So I should say that I am trained, I'm Australian. So some of the things, there's obviously a connecting theme with art therapists in the US and the UK. There's general themes, but that's my approach. And I want to acknowledge that there may be some differences in different cultural settings and different areas. And so I haven't worked in America. It's one of my dreams. I'd like to do that one day. But if anything, if you have any questions about how art therapists work in your country and how it's a little bit different to how I've worked in Australia and in Qatar, please share your experiences or ask me questions related to that. Because I think there is, obviously every country has a different element. In Qatar, I definitely have focused on art making as a therapy because there's so much stigma about mental health. And so it was getting people to trust the process of creating and having more confidence in art because there wasn't the same exposure to art materials. So I had a lot of children that had never painted before. So I had to change my role as an art therapist to meet the needs of the community and how it is slightly different in different places. Okay, so I'll go into what we'll cover today. So we'll do a brief overview of art therapy, research related to the self-care and creativity, how to use different art materials for self-expression and play. I think you'll see throughout my presentation, I really see art materials is a really important tool and the tool set that I use. And I know that a lot of child specialists do incorporate creativity and crafts and all different types of art media within their own practice. So this is just my element of that, some of the theories behind why we use different materials. I'm going to talk about the inner critic and how to start enjoying doing art. So to focus away from making a perfect image to actually acknowledging your feelings when you're trying to capture a difficult emotion. I use art as a way of self-care in my own career. So when I have a difficult family and I can't quite understand their perspective, I often do artwork to help about the situation. If I've seen something traumatic, I capture that. Or when I'm having that difficulty with a patient and their family members, I usually do a portrait. And that's how it gives me that space to think about and give a new perspective. So the things that I'm talking about today, I actually use in my own practice, and that has kept me, enjoying working in difficult environments. I think the hospital is a stressful environment, and we're working with a lot of different existential feelings. And so, it's just, hopefully this will be helpful for everyone. And then I've put in some experiential exercises and of course, questions and reflections. Thank you. So I don't know, probably people will have seen this, but I always use this quote from the American Art Therapy Association because it really does encompass all aspects. So art therapy is an integrative mental health and human service profession that enriches the lives of the individuals, families, and communities through active art making, creative process, applied psychological theory, and human experience within the psychotherapeutic relationship. So the power of art is that you don't need words to convey your feelings, that you can actually draw, especially with family relationships, you can draw that, and that actually captures sort of those difficult feelings. Okay, yeah, thank you. So overall, I feel that art therapy has two main approaches, and within that, I've sort of divided them into four just to flesh out some of the themes. So has most people had experience with art therapy, I was seeing from the chat that they've worked or they've had some sort of connection. So this might be what you've heard before. So insight. So number one is insight. So it promotes cognitive and sensory motor functions, increase awareness, behavioral patterns, and foster self-esteem. So I know in the hospital environment, you use like art materials to sort of, when a child is highly anxious, you think about what art materials you use and apply that. It also, you can see their movement and their coordination, their confidence is a big thing through art. So this also teaches a child about their own challenges, what they want to work on, what they want to improve. So coping skills, so it's like cultivate emotional resilience, learn how to sit or tolerate difficult feelings. So in Qatar, what's really popular is slime. And so I use the metaphor of making slime, and we use model magic and shaving cream. So I don't know if anyone has done that before. So it's that natural metaphor that it is uncomfortable. You're mixing these two different materials together, and you're trying to stretch them out and bring them into a cohesive material. But in the meantime, you've got too much shaving cream on your hands. And so I express that to the child, like having that tolerance, like you have to work through this difficult feelings of being overstimulated by the shaving cream and the mess, but then it will turn into a product. So there's a lot of play with that. And I think in Qatar, a lot of children aren't given permission to be messy. And so it's the first time that they sort of have that exploration. So it can be at first overwhelming. Everything is overwhelming. And so slime is a really great thing because it's so popular. It sort of normalizes that experience and talking about difficult feelings and when something is uncomfortable. Okay, so obviously communicate and process feelings through art making and storytelling. And I think a coping skill is also learning a new skill, having pride in learning something different and challenging yourself. Number 3, so it's all about building relationships. That's what sort of takes it to an art activity to something deeper when you've built a trusting relationship with a child, and that you're not trying to teach them to be a perfect artist, that you're actually giving them the skills, actually how to teach them to experiment, teach them how to try new things, accept that not every artwork will be beautiful or amazing. Some artworks are very difficult. And with art, sometimes there is that sense of failure when you have something very clear in your mind and you can't achieve it instantaneously, that you're not relaxed when you're doing it. Art sort of is a metaphor. It's that sort of those difficult feelings, I think, that existential elements that bring into art making. And then you have that to talk to someone through that, like, it's okay, I've made mistakes too. I sit with the burnout literature, a lot of enhance the group activity, a lot of the group activities actually provided all the self-care for the group. So like there was a lot of oncologists and doctors that actually the group experience and doing art together as a group really helped in like expressing those difficult feelings and name the unnamed and things like that. So I think we'll go into that a little bit later. Through art making, and you learn about healthy boundaries. They learn how to communicate needs, reduce or resolve conflicts and distress. So it's sort of have a lot of things that you can play and engage through art materials without talking, and that sort of builds those communication skills that when you give children more permission and freedom to be themselves, or for, you know, even with an adult relationship, obviously, it can be really powerful. And you're not correcting them like an art teacher, like you're not correcting their expression, you're actually acknowledging all the work that they have done. And the 4th is advocacy for mental health. So I do, in my role in Qatar, I think there's so much stigma about mental health. I try to do interviews, I do things at the university to sort of normalize these experiences. That's how I help bring awareness to the need of mental health within this region, but also how art can be used in different ways. So hopefully reducing stigma, promoting awareness and how to receive services, to open people's experiences and their minds about how to create healthy lifestyles. Okay, thanks, Caitlin. Okay, so this is a common graphic. I don't know if anyone's heard it, but seen it before. And it really encaptures the experience of the differences between like the thoughtfulness and the mindfulness that goes into art making. So as you can see on the left-hand side, the art activity, you're expected to have a set of skills taught. The primary goal is in completing a finished artwork, and it's usually to a certain standard that the teacher praises or corrects the child's artwork. It might be the art is exhibited, evaluate and assess. Well, although art therapy can be exhibited, you give the person a lot more power in what they want to show, because not all artwork has to be displayed. I think that's really important. I think for me, it's giving the person their voice back, like to pick what they want to tell the society about their experience. And I think with art activities in particular, it's aesthetically judged. So it's that sense of if a child or an adult is trying to capture a difficult feeling like grief, it's not going to be a beautiful image. It is actually going to be quite raw and quite haunting at times. So obviously on the other side of the art therapy, it doesn't have to be pleasing. The role of the art therapist is really to be like a guide or like alongside. You don't, although I can teach children skills about doing art, it's more working alongside them and respecting their experimentation and them trying new things, and sort of encouraging that from them. And yeah, so obviously in the middle is that sort of like the connecting themes. Oh, sorry, the use of many different art materials. Creativity is involved in both. So, okay, thanks, Caitlin. Have we got any questions so far? No? Okay. All right. Okay. So the importance of self-care and creativity. So there's been so much, I guess there has been actually a really strong collection of essays about how art therapy has been used, and it's really within the medical environment for burnout and emotional fatigue. It's really connected to oncology, cancer care and palliative care. It's a lot with doctors and residents. And it really was used as a tool for them to talk about their feelings. So there was like, there's also the element of drama and narrative therapy, that they would respond to an artwork. So they would view an artwork and respond to it. So that was like, they were facilitated through like expression, acting out, making noises, making sounds to really extend how the residents connected with each other, and representing like and replaying scenes within the hospital. I think this is a really important thing is they've been using a lot of viewing art, and how that is very important for people to read different facial cues and really sort of assess the room, the patient's room, but like through looking at art and viewing art has really allowed residents to actually increase their awareness of the emotional intensity sometimes in the room and what the relationships are. So, and that was just through painting. So it's really interesting how art has been sort of viewing and making art has been a really big thing in helping emotional burnout and fatigue. So the three main themes that came through were self-awareness and self-care, allowing people another perspective, that they would to try something new, take a change, make a change. It sort of also allowed them to reflect on their past relationships with patients that didn't go well. That was one of those grounding things that it had stayed with them. I think everyone who's worked in a hospital environment, and I know myself, I've had children and families that I know I haven't handled to the best of my ability. I've tried, but my ego or just not reading the room appropriately or understanding the family in hindsight, I had a clearer picture. So it's sort of how art has helped them express these difficult feelings, and given them more self-awareness about the value of their work and the meaning of their work. And the second point was about collegial connection and organization. So that was a huge thing, that doctors felt more comfortable and open about talking about their feelings, sometimes the sense of failure when a patient's treatment hadn't gone to plan and the medication hadn't worked. That was a big thing within this theme, as well as reflecting on death, bereavement, and finding meaning in those relationships, allowing them to reconnect with those difficult things. Yeah, so it's really interesting to see how hospitals are becoming more open-minded, and they're really, I know in Qatar, I was doing, every now and then I would do sessions with different ward nursing staff, and it's allowing them to be the individual, not just a nurse, or having that that safe space to reflect on what their work and that time, and that yeah, I think it's I think the article highlighted the importance of time in reflecting which they weren't given that on a daily shift. Yeah, thank you, Caitlin.
Michelle, I almost think too, it allowed the nurses to have fun. Like I saw them smile and it made their day almost feel lighter, because their days can feel heavy, especially in these chronic populations in these specific areas of the hospital. Like you almost could feel the aura of the ward or unit almost shift, right, to like this lighter,
Yeah.
more fun. You saw nurses smile who didn't typically smile after they engaged. And I remember even some of them saying like, oh, that was fun. Or like, oh, it's so exciting to play. Like they referred to it as play. Which is interesting. I didn't hear a lot of them refer to it as art or art therapy, but they would reference it as play. Like they felt like it was adult play and it was fun.
Yeah. And I used to do the same activities that I would do with children. So they would understand why I was doing that. Why, like, sometimes you go back to the basics, and it's like, so I did slime with them as well, like, because they saw me make so much slime, and then they could understand why we're making slime for like emotional regulation. And and I think having that sort of joy and that sort of, stepping out of I think that's a really good reflection, Caitlin. I agree. I think sometimes you can't take yourself too seriously, especially when you're using clay. It's the splat, the sound, the mess. I'm messy. I love that type of stuff.
Michelle, is there anything, because like I said, I think it's all CCLSs here today. Is there anything that you feel like you would share in particular about getting staff, like ward or unit staff, engaged in therapeutic art and engaged in that way? Like I know there's a lot of hospitals that will do like mental support. They'll have like a week where they support mental health, and they offer maybe free lunches or like a masseuse on site, and they do things to support the staff, which is great. But I think there's also something to be said about doing it on a more regular basis and incorporating art and quote play and fun for the staff. Is there any advice you would have for the CCLSs here today as to how to advocate and incorporate utilizing art for not only the child life team, but to their staff at the hospital at large too?
I think I do lean into the silly side, right? Because I think in Qatar people are quite serious. I don't know if you remember that, Caitlin. So you're giving them permission to be a little bit silly, and that I want them to, like, whatever they say won't shock me. So like you kind of working from that, like, don't take it too seriously. It's just a little bit of fun. That's how I used to really address it. That I think if you were too precious about like, this is a very powerful medium, can you see how it can change lives, that's never the right approach. You have to have that real belief that it is working and that you see the difference. But I probably yeah, I always sort of try to use as much humor as I can. I think that's how I do it with nursing staff. And acknowledging they'll be a bit uncomfortable, like initially, and then they get into it. And I think I have seen it work constantly. So, the last like 11, 12 years, I've seen every adult that has made art has responded to it. Like there has been some form of shift. Even if they haven't enjoyed it, they can talk about what they didn't like about it. And that can be therapy in itself, right? So, yeah. I don't know. I think viewing art or having art around, like if they see art being made is always really good. Like if you have a mural and you add to the mural, things like that, they can see the built environment changing and that other nurses have made something and put it up on the wall or on the mural. That's been a really big thing that's been beneficial. And leaning on the side of teamwork, like it will help build team morale. This is something you can do together. Yeah.
Perfect. Thank you. Thanks, Michelle.
Yeah. Yeah, so it's really interesting that you said about needing more sessions. So like a lot of the literature said that they had at least 6 structured sessions with 2 sessions linked to exploring themes around the identity. And I think that's, yeah, the ongoing support, that is what helps people the most. I think that you can't like you can't get everything that you need from one session. Unfortunately, usually you can have a little bit of fun and experiment, but I think I'll highlight later, it's like trying again and again. I think that's what, there's an art practice, there's a reason why it's called art practice. You practice doing art. It's not just something you do. You kind of change it into your way of life. So yeah, that is a very good point, Caitlin. And I think why they talked about themes of identity. I think art always links to identity. I think, just a simple thing of knowing someone's favorite color, just like different symbols that they use within their own life really feeds into their identity. And they can see themselves clearer sometimes through doing art, like having that perspective of the artwork being the way. So I guess that sense of identity and that sense of sometimes the selflessness that is involved in highly emotional work has that depersonalization and detachment. So art really having these different things of narrative therapy, like writing stories, writing poems, really fed into that, like their viewpoint creates that hospital environment that if you're detached, you don't read those signs, you don't allow the family to get the best service that they can. I think it also highlighted as like that team collective artwork, acknowledged achievements of the team, because I think everyone, I don't know, like Child Life in particular, sometimes we don't focus on the achievements enough. It's all about like getting more, seeing more patients, doing it quicker, more efficiently, but not actually acknowledging when something's been done well and to a high quality, and when like something handled effectively. I think it's also like, as I highlighted before, like symbols and metaphors, that they feel like they're being witnessed by their peer group. I always love this quote by Malchiodi. She's one of the main writers about art therapy, and she has worked in hospitals and really diverse backgrounds, but she said art can hold strong feelings without the artist needing to talk about the art image. And I think I pointed in the last slide, quiet time, having that reflective space really helped in processing their feelings. Okay, so I thought I would talk about how art materials, think about them from a new perspective. So please, if anyone has any feedback, I would love to get your opinions about this. So the theory says pencils and markers provide structure. So coloring and mandalas are really great for a sense of control. The line is fixed, is sort of that focused intention of coloring something in, making a pattern. Drawing is a more intellectual form of art making. So it allows you to observe, copy, journal. It's something that is sort of a high level in the awareness or brain. So I just had this suggestion here, like if you want to be more into your body and be embodied while you're doing artwork, use bigger paper, use things like pastels that allow for movement. I think music's really important, like when you're doing things like drawing. Oil pastels are really good for getting that sense of like connecting with your body, using space. Yeah, the bigger paper, the better sometimes. I think it's sort of, it can be uncomfortable when you first start, a bit daunting using a large piece of paper, but it really does allow sort of for that flow and just enjoying that space of actually making a mark on a paper. And I'm not sure if other people have used this, but using both hands at the same time. So you're not focused on what you're drawing, you're actually just focusing on the movement and connecting the two hands together, whether they're different, whether they're the same repetitive pattern. It's sort of a way to experience art, not from that intellectual place, but more from a physical place. Yeah, we can change to the next slide. So paint, ink, and watercolor. So paint is my favorite. I always offer everything, obviously, but I really connect with paint. So this is like everyone might have a material that they really connect to. So paint is really good for expressive, like spontaneity and play. I love how it flicks, how it's sometimes it is uncontrolled. It can be physical. It can allow for like mixing colors, mark making. You can do simple things like a splashing or a splat. And so I use that sort of a lot with the adults that are trying to shift from just doing landscapes or pictures, but you sort of introduce them to more abstract artwork. And that's sort of creating different, like working with shades and patterns as opposed to just making something a realistic image. So obviously one of the things with paint, it's messy and uncontrolled. So if you're anxious about mess, start with watercolor. But what I really like about painting is sort of that middle material that it safely challenges you. Like, so if someone is really highly controlled and they're very anxious about mess, you can start with painting, because I think it's clay will be a bit overstimulating, but paint is that sort of in between. The more water you add, the more fluid it is and the more messy it is, but it's also, you can sort of work with all different elements of paintings. So it's sort of that, yeah, in between one that's really good. Okay, so mixed media collage. I'm sure that everyone has done this in their own life. I think it's always really great because it allows symbolic images to create stories. Ripping, if you want to connect with your body in different ways, ripping, scrunching, layering paper, thinking about textures. It's really good for people that don't feel confident or they're feeling a bit self-conscious, like they haven't made art for a long time. It's a really good way for them to really connect and sort of start from somewhere. And then when they're ready to be a bit more like self-expressive, then you can introduce different art materials. But what I really like about collage is that it emphasizes storytelling, like how do these images all come together to make that image, and getting children or adults to really talk about that. Like, how do we connect this panda with that leaf? Is it on a branch? Is it on the ground? Is it rolling? Is it moving? Is there any sense of movement in the collage? And I think that's what's really interesting, that no collage looks the same. Sort of like the layering and the chaos sometimes really creates an interesting story. Well, the next one. So clay or plasticine. So clay is very powerful for using physical movement with connecting with your body. So if that's something you want to pursue, because this is particularly important with emotional fatigue, they do suggest that you go through this element, that you go through moving from the intellectual but to more into the heart, and that is clay. So like by warming clay, by throwing, kneading, helps to, it's very good for releasing anger, or when someone's feeling like stuck, that they can't move past something. They feel like they're blocked. Play naturally allows people of all ages to regress. I think it's sort of like that first connection with childhood that you do Play-Doh. So it sort of allows those like high functioning, someone that's really highly anxious and really in their mind, to really move and transform the material in a different way. It sort of challenges them. Obviously, like, it can be overwhelming. It's one of those things that it can be very messy. So you're mindful of how you introduce it. And it's also that you might want that boundary or that containment through a tray or a visual boundary. Okay, so this is one of my favorite quotes. Every child is an artist. The problem is to remain an artist once he grows up. Because I think that everyone would have experienced that every child is innately creative. But through society and people's comments and trying to impress parents, sometimes these things can drop off. How's everyone going? Does anyone have any questions as we're going through? No? Oh yeah, I saw that comment. Yeah, play, art, there's such a strong connection. I think it's interesting because we're talking about the inner critic now, but it's also like, if you take yourself too seriously and you have that, oh yeah, this is fine. Thanks, Caitlin. If you take it too seriously and you're really focused on making something perfect, or that what you have in your mind's eye and trying to at all costs create this image, you don't play. You don't have that same spontaneity that you need to make a good work of art. So yeah, I agree. Play is key. There's play in all different forms. So I guess, like, there's that term of the inner critic. I don't know if everyone has a different version. So it comes in all different ways. So like the inner critic is often related to a previous critical teacher, parent, or peer that has responded to your self-expression, and that could be any form of self-expression as a child. I know when I worked with 80-year-olds, a lot of them, like the end of their lives, they talked about, I liked art and then I had a bad art teacher and I was mocked in some way. They felt like their art was a joke or was used as an example what not to do, and that and then that the person stopped doing art, and that was a very common theme. And so I hope, like, a lot of people have that story, that they had that one comment or what they felt was one humiliating moment, and then they've disconnected from art. So and a lot of that usually happens naturally as a teenager, I think, as well, that that's when people really find out if they're going to be an artist, be more creative, or they sort of focus their attention in different areas. So you find that a lot of people are stuck within their drawing time. They were drawing regularly to that moment, and so they still have that sort of awkward adolescent artwork. Yeah, so it's just one of those interesting things about development. So I think what's really important is, if you want to be more creative and introduce it into your life, you don't need a lot of time, but it's, as I was saying before, it's like a practice. To make it a regular activity. So I always say, like, at least 10 minutes. I always think about, you have to create an atmosphere. It's not just about doing art. It's sort of, I know a lot of people think it's mood-based, but it's also like, if you want to do something in front of a view is always really interesting. Like it might be an artwork that you're responding to, but also being in nature is a huge inspiration for a lot of people. Music, what music do you connect to? Can you draw to the music? Is there some way that you can have that connection and use music as your inspiration? Just having simple things like, think about it as a fun event. So have it like drinks, like make sure that you have a cup of tea or a coffee, or have snacks. I think it's sort of allowing you that sort of, this is your self-care moment, setting up that space how you want it. And, you know, maybe it's just that little a bit of time that you have for yourself and for your own self-expression. I find a lot of people are surprised that when they haven't done art for a long time, like it might be 20 years, they expect it to be great straight away. No, it's also, it will be average. I regularly paint, I regularly draw, and I still have artwork. So it just, it doesn't go where you want it. I think it's sort of learning, sometimes having creativity allows you that flexibility of thought that you aren't as stuck, that you're like, look, okay, you feel more resilience. The more you make art, the more you want to make art, and you're not sometimes as hard on yourself when it doesn't look. You're like, I can try that in a different medium. Maybe I need to try something different. Maybe I need to like switch from painting to photography and take some photos instead. And then you can always go back to painting, or, you know, like finding what suits you within that creative sphere.
Michelle,
it's like,
is it okay if I ask the group a quick question?
yeah, of course, please.
Okay, I would love to hear if you can put in the chat for us, because I think Michelle will be able to address it really well. Has anyone experienced this, like this, what Michelle is talking about, like this inner critic where they feel like they're blocked and they don't want to engage or don't feel like they know where to start to engage in therapeutic art for themselves? Like I know for me, I actually had Michelle do a art therapy session with me, because I knew that I wasn't using art in my practice as much as I could because I felt scared. I felt like I wasn't creative enough as a specialist, or I didn't know the right things to offer the children, or I felt like I was blocked myself in artwork. So I could tell when I was reflecting on my practice clinically that I wasn't offering art as often as I would have liked because I didn't feel confident and comfortable doing it, and I didn't have a good practice myself. So I'm just curious. I know I have dealt a lot with an inner critic because I had a really, really poor experience with art as a child, and it stuck with me clearly throughout my life. And
Yeah.
Michelle has worked with me personally and processed that.
Well,
Has anyone
yeah,
else
and I think
experienced?
that is such a common theme. It really, unfortunately, like, oh, it's heartbreaking. You know, I had a bad art teacher myself. Yeah, or
So
yeah,
thanks. I see someone
yeah,
put it in the chat that Catherine, thank you, Catherine, for being vulnerable and sharing that she sometimes, I feel imposter syndrome and I try to offer art to my patients. Yeah, I do art myself because I don't consider myself as an artist. I agree completely. That's exactly how I was feeling too. I was just curious if a lot of people felt that way, or if it
yeah.
was I was an outcast in this feeling, or has anyone else ever felt that way?
Well, yeah, and I think it's, I I see it. It's not, and it's always not a bad thing, but I see it with nurses. Like if they want to connect with a child that's really difficult, and the child invites them to draw, and they go, "I can't do this," and then they lose the connection they could have built with that child because they haven't allowed that flexibility. Like children don't really judge what you're drawing, to be honest. They're just really happy that you're spending time with them. Like, you know, not many children criticize their parents' artwork because um, they just want their parents to be there and have something fun to do together that they can share. So I think that's what you sort of learn through children, that they're just so creative. It keeps you inspired.
Yeah. Michelle, do you want me to go to the next slide?
Oh, I just saw another. Oh, yeah.
Yep, Liz,
Uh,
yep, she
yeah,
said,
a
I
few
can relate
comments.
to that too. I'd love to use art more in my practice. I think I get hung up on drawing because I cannot draw. Yep, but having other
Yeah.
art forms is so helpful. So I usually go to watercolor or paint. Thanks, Liz.
Yeah, and I've got some examples that you can use if you're from a particular drawing perspective. Like, I'll have a drawing activity we can do. Oh yeah, this is it. So I don't know if people have heard this before. This is like draw a line, shape, and color about how you're feeling. So hopefully everyone's got some form of markers. I've got mine. And it's really about trying to capture the current feeling of what you're feeling. What is your inner critic saying? I know my inner critic goes, "You've lost it." Like, did I ever have this talent? It has that's the voice that I hear in my head, right? I'm gonna try, like, I'm doing art and it's not going how I want, just try to be curious about what's coming through to you. So I've kept it deliberately vague. Draw a line, shape, and color about how you were feeling. So it doesn't have to look like anything. Think of a color that you're connecting to. If it's going to be fast or slow. Are you nervous, excited? What is this talk giving you? I'll give you like, Caitlin, should we give 5 minutes? Is that okay? Or
I
what do you think?
would give a little less, just because we only have about 4 minutes left for the presentation. So I would just
Okay.
say give a minute for this one, just because for time.
Well, short and sweet. I'll draw how I'm feeling because I have to acknowledge that. I have to be authentic and vulnerable, just like everyone else. Okay, how's everyone going?
So Michelle, no one's sharing, so I'll just share. I got nervous. I started to actually sweat a little bit.
That's what I expect sometimes.
I was nervous about coming up with something like novel, and I panicked. So I drew the shapes that were on the screen and I copied those shapes, and I actually, not even on purpose, I ended up using the same colors.
There you go. That's good. That's your starting point. I think it's such a simple activity, and I think I resonate with it because you can go for some, like, you can develop on it so easily. Like, it's sort of that basic, like, just to do something, just start wherever you are at. Everyone can draw a line, shape, and color. So no. Well
Does
done,
anybody
Caitlin.
else want to share? That's okay.
Okay.
Oh,
okay.
Liz said, I started drawing sharp angles that connected, and I'm realizing it looks like a cartoon BAM, and it's kind of anxious but fun.
Yeah. That's good. It's good. You took it, I think you'll hear me keep on saying, like, acknowledge when you try something new, like that it is nervous. That's what I think this is what keeps us flexible in our thinking. Oh, okay, I can see more questions.
Someone drew a large light blue circle. No clue why.
Well, circle, I've got a thing about mandalas, so it's very interesting. There's a lot of power in the visual sign of a circle. How's the time, Caitlin? Should we move to the next slide? Yeah. Thank you for sharing, everyone. Sometimes when you're presenting, you feel so far away. It's just something sometimes about doing art with other people and seeing them and engaging with them. It's so much fun. So I just had this as like the reflection. So I think it was Liz that talked about, like, look at your image. What do you see? Is it quickly drawn lines? Is it strong and bold and confident? Is it shaky? Like, look at your artwork from a different perspective, not from like that criticism, but like, what can you see? What kind of movement is there? So then it's always like, when you do art, like, think about how you felt before, or when you first confronted with doing an art activity. Usually there's some form of anxiety. And is it different actually doing it? Has it felt some form of relief or release? Or, you're still grumpy. That's okay. I've done a lot of good artwork while I'm grumpy that you kind of, it makes you more tenacious. Okay, we can move to the next activity. You probably know this guy. I love this quote. No mistakes, only happy accidents. I think, bringing art to the mainstream is always really a powerful thing. So it's the process of doing art for self-care, or helping with your own emotional fatigue and burnout, is to enjoy the process. When you've created that right environment, that you're kind of trying something different, really try not to be hard on yourself. It's also important to know, like, when you're trying to capture, as I was saying before, something uncomfortable, or if you're reflecting on a patient or something that has happened that you're not sure what you're just confused. It's not meant to be beautiful. These are difficult feelings. That's why it has that, just to have, empathy for yourself. I always think it's important to acknowledge how hard you worked on the artwork. Did you learn something new? Like, to shift your attitude from the product to the process. Like, think about the time and effort and how you've tried and you've laid, and like how the journey of the artwork has been created. It's really interesting. The more relaxed you are, usually the better the results. When you've made a mistake, like if you see them as happy accidents, it does shift your thinking about art. You sort of don't take it as seriously and kind of come from that really more play perspective. You don't have to take it seriously, no one has to see it. Sometimes it's really good to have your own journals that you can kind of see the themes over your artwork without anyone else having to see, if that's something that gives you joy, and you don't have to share it with everyone, that can be your gift to yourself. You took a risk, praise yourself. So there's a lot of these common themes. I think it's important to sort of, think about. Oh, a lovely comment. Okay. Okay, so someone was saying that they drew a light blue circle, because the circle, it usually represents a safe and contained space. So this was actually an activity that was given to people that had emotional fatigue and burnout in the literature. So you can trace around or draw a circle. I know we don't have a lot of time to really focus on this, but if you can really, some people are really confronted by a white page because it's seen as pristine and perfect, and they don't want to change it, they don't want to wreck it. Drawing within a circle or outside of a circle kind of breaks that space already. So, it can be a really good starting point, and it does work with a lot of anxiety and depression. It's one of those sort of creative tools that you have. Yeah, and so it's one of those things, creating a circle, like shifting that perspective, it can silence a person's inner critic and induce a calm meditative state. So yeah, thank you for inviting me to do this. I've been so grateful for all the experience of working with child life specialists and how they've enriched my own practice. And so hopefully I know that these tips and these skills will help you on some level. This is my email if you have any questions. Yes, thank you, everybody. Thanks
Does anyone have, I know we are about 1 minute left. Does anyone have a last question for Michelle? Comment, thought, something they want to process?
Thank you, Michelle, for this great presentation. I really love the suggestions that you provided us, and I am excited to give it a try to doing the left and right hand drawing. I think that's something that I've never done. But just just curious, because of the place where you have been providing art therapy, it's Qatar primarily Muslim? Is that correct? Yeah. Do you find?
Yeah. Oh, sorry.
Oh, maybe it isn't, but I guess I am wondering how that plays out in terms of visual representations and how I feel. I am no expert by any means, just knowing some friends that are of that faith that at times would say how in their homes you don't try to do things that are very representational or something to that
Yeah.
effect. And I was just curious of your experience working with that aspect that plays a cultural component.
Yeah. Yeah, I guess you can't stereotype. There is all this research about how Muslims feel uncomfortable doing like self-portraits and things like that, and there is an element to that. They really, I think in Qatar in particular, art's relatively new, so not all schools offer art. I think that's been a big thing. That they're learning in some of the schools. You can tell they're not taught problem solving. So I've been using, I do a lot of like woodwork sets that sort of I use that as an informal assessment to see if they can follow instructions, because they haven't been given that freedom, or that it hasn't been nurtured through art. It's sort of poetry and written language has been, or calligraphy has been sort of more focused upon it in some areas. So everyone has that creativity. It's just a different thing. Like I find like it's not as gendered. So like in Australia, it would be very rare for a boy to draw a flower. I don't know, it might be some of the society is telling them like boys don't draw flowers, but here a lot of like boys and their fathers, men, draw flowers, because I think it's links into their like the tiles and the embroidery and things like that. So yeah, hopefully I've answered that question okay. Yeah, I just think they don't have the same they haven't had the same exposure to art materials, and I've seen a difference in the 5 years that there's more different products coming into the market here, while they weren't always affordable before.
We recognize that it's 2:02, so people have to sign off. We thank you for those of you who joined and participated, and we really appreciate you being here. If you want to stay on, Michelle, if you can really quickly, Chris asked a question. She said she would love to hear about an intervention that you've done that sticks out. The conversation maybe it led to, or the outcome, or something you could share.
Okay. Okay, I can talk about someone that didn't want to do art that stood out. So it was a older woman, and I walked into the room and I was like, oh hi, I'm the art therapist, and I had a trolley and I was young and confident, and and this lady goes, I'm dying here and you want me to do art? It was that shocking, like that speaking of the truth is that quite shocking, and I laughed because I thought, well, yeah, and I was like, yeah, that's my job. I'm here to help you do art. If you want to do art, if you want to make art for your family. And that was a really like just a simple conversation, but it led to such a deep relationship that I think because I wasn't defensive, and that I took her anxiety. She was going through something very serious, and I was coming in with an art trolley, and it would seem ridiculous. And so sometimes not being defensive and meeting her at she was at, like, it was purely shocking. And she was amazing. She had a very bad vision, but she really connected to the movement elements. And so I think that stayed with me, that she really loved the silence, having that space to herself, and then doing art that had movement and music. That, yeah, so that was the intervention that I always think fondly of, because she was so anti-art when I entered. Yeah, she had a strong inner critic.
Michelle, thank you. One last question. Someone asked what type of art material or activity maybe that you would recommend specific for like self-care for a cardiac ICU team. So not for the patients, but for the staff, for cardiac staff.
Yeah.
Anything you'd recommend?
I'm just thinking, it's a little bit cliche, but I always think cardiac, you always connect with the heart. And so maybe giving them heart-shaped paper or some reference to a heart. Like I find that like watercolor usually I find sometimes with staff, when something's prepared, that's something a little bit special that I've painted paper for them, like a background, and that they can draw or write on top. That's been really powerful because it's like a little present, something simple that has a bit of color. And so if you feel like they're responsive to that heart metaphor or something like that, there's a symbol within the team that's really powerful, or a logo of the hospital. Sometimes painting and preparing something as a background and they can add to it. That is a really good way to start, that, you know, it's something a little bit special, being given like a little artwork to work on, and it takes that anxiety of initially starting something. Does that make sense?
Liz, I know Michelle too. Michelle, you're probably just too modest and don't want to praise yourself, but I know Michelle in Qatar, at one point, she took a handful, like at least 3 different activities to a unit before and gave them choices and options, much like CCLS give our patients, right? We want to give options. We know the power of options and choice. I know Michelle has given choice before, and just from an observer, I would watch the staff pick and choose what they felt most comfortable doing. And it was interesting because if they didn't pick one of the activities, but then they saw their colleague engage in it, then it almost felt like, okay, that's safe for me to do too. I was nervous at first, or maybe I was too uncomfortable doing that, but now that I've seen her do it, I'll do that too. So almost that idea of offering those choices to the ICU team too, and letting them explore what they feel comfortable with in the moment that day. Again, Michelle is too modest to share all of her success, so I'll share for her. But that's something that I've seen Michelle do that worked really well.
Well, I think it's like connecting with the natural born leader sometimes, like that person that has that sort of, they don't mind taking a risk, or connecting with that one person in the room that that other people like aspire, or it really does work with group dynamics, doesn't it? Like that they take that risk first, and then everyone else opens up and tries something new. So that, you know, I try to identify the maybe sometimes it's a feisty one, isn't it? Like the one with the high energy that there's
Michelle, I know I said that was the last question, but we do have one more question. So I'll see if you can address this one really fast too, and then we'll sign off. Allison wrote, can you recommend an art prompt that would be good for like staff to reflect on, like say in a staff meeting?
Oh, okay.
Good question.
I was thinking, yeah, it's a really good question. I'm just thinking in a staff meeting, I think if there's a theme that's happened that week, there's a few things events that have happened, or like if there's been, unfortunately, sometimes there's like a death, or there's been a few deaths or something like that. Like you pick the theme that you've experienced that week, that people have felt a bit tired or fatigued, and using that as a starting point is always really powerful. That I think a lot of child life specialists are really good at observing the dynamics of the whole ward and the families, like some of the general difficult themes that families are experiencing, and then bringing that into light, and using that as a theme, like any sort of metaphor around that theme. Does that make sense?
Yeah. Thank you, Michelle. Oh, yeah. Thank you everyone for your questions. I want to respect your time here. Thank you so much, Michelle, for your time, for your expertise, and for sharing your passion with us. Thank you all again who joined. If you missed at the beginning, be on the lookout for an email from Hearts Connected, again, with the recording and your survey. And of course, once you complete your survey, you will be sent your certificate for your PDU. So thank you everyone again. If you have any further questions, please feel free to reach out to Michelle. She kindly shared her email address, and then you're always welcome to reach out to us at Hearts Connected too. Thank you so much, everyone.